Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide, a reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that the prophet Joseph Smith and his brother Hyrum, along with 4 other men, avoided being killed because Brigadier General Alexander Doniphan refused to carry out an order to execute them? Instead, they spent nearly 5 months in Liberty Jail. While there, they endured cruel conditions and asked God for help. Joseph received answers to his prayers in Revelations that are now sections 121, 122, and 123 of the Doctrine and Covenants.
Today we are jumping into a really fascinating and pretty brutal chapter of history.
We're diving into the sources around Liberty Jail in Missouri and the, agonizing 6 months that Joseph Smith and 5 of his companions were confined there.
And that includes Hyrum Smith, Sidney Rigdon, a few others.
Right. And they were incarcerated from December 1st, 1838, all the way through one of the harshest winters on record, until April 6, 1839.
So our mission today is really to pull apart this paradox. How did this period of profound physical suffering and what the records call unlawful oppressions, how did that lead to some of the most powerful spiritual writings in the Doctrine and Covenants?
We're talking specifically about sections 121, 122, and 123.
Right.
And to really get it, you have to understand the context. This wasn't some standard legal arrest. It was, part of a much bigger state-sanctioned persecution.
The timeline is so critical here. The leaders are locked away in this jail, completely isolated, while their people are essentially being turned into refugees.
The suffering is doubled. They're carrying that weight with them.
So let's unpack that conflict. Why were they even in Missouri to begin with? It goes back a bit.
It goes back to 1831. A revelation had designated Missouri as the place consecrated for the gathering of the saints, the place to build the city of Zion.
So they were there trying to follow a commandment, essentially.
Exactly. They were trying to build this community, but that attempt led to just escalating hostility. Historians call it the Mormon War.
And by late 1838, it had gotten so bad that the governor, Lilburn Boggs, issued the infamous extermination order.
Which is just as brutal as it sounds. It meant the saints had to either leave the state entirely or, face destruction. They were driven from the western counties.
And it's in the middle of all this malice, this official government malice, that Joseph and other leaders actually try to negotiate a truce. They weren't looking for a fight.
No, they were trying to find a peaceful solution for their people.
And for doing that, they get arrested.
Right. On very questionable charges. They're put in chains. And the initial plan was execution. They were literally waiting to be shot by the state militia.
This is where the story takes such a sharp turn. I mean, it's a critical historical nugget that comes out of the sources, an intervention that saves their lives, but, condemns them to Liberty Jail.
You're talking about Brigadier General Alexander Doniphan.
Yes. He's the one who gets the order for the summary execution, and he just refuses.
And he wasn't just some soldier. He was a lawyer. He understood the law, and he knew that this order was completely illegal. It was murder. Plain and simple.
His defiance is just absolute. He put his entire career, maybe his life, on the line. And the sources give us his exact words to his superior officer.
Yeah, he said, "It is cold-blooded murder. I will not obey your order."
And then he adds, "And if you execute these men, I will hold you responsible before an earthly tribunal, so help me God."
Just think about that for a second. That's not just saying no, sir. That's open insubordination in a military conflict. He's threatening his own commanding officer with legal action.
Wow.
So his moral compass just completely overrides the chain of command, and that's what prevents their immediate deaths. Instead, they get sent to Liberty Jail.
So his courage buys them time, but it throws them into what you can only describe as a 6-month living hell.
Exactly. Let's shift from that political persecution to the physical reality of the place, the architecture of affliction.
They arrive on December 1st, 1838.
Just as one of the coldest winters on record was starting.
And the jail itself, it wasn't just meant to hold people. The sources make it clear it was designed to punish.
Oh, absolutely. It was this small 2-story stone box, considered completely escape-proof. And they weren't even on the main floor. They were put down in the dungeon.
The cellar. You could only get to it through a trap door in the floor.
A heavy trap door, yeah. And the ceiling down there was barely 6 feet high.
So for some of the men, including Joseph Smith, who was a tall man, they couldn't stand up straight.
For 6 months. Imagine that. Constantly hunched, constantly cramped. The floor was just rough stone, covered with a bit of dirty straw.
Let's talk about the walls, because the thickness is staggering.
It is. It wasn't just a thick stone wall. It was a layered system. So you have 2 feet of limestone on the outside.
Okay.
Then a 1-foot gap of empty space, and then another foot of thick oak logs on the inside.
So a combined 4-foot thick barrier.
4 feet separating you from the outside world.
Right.
From light, from air, and crucially, from any warmth in that brutal winter. It was basically a tomb.
And the daily trauma went way beyond just being cold and cramped.
Mm-hmm. It was a constant fight for survival.
Let's talk about the food. The details here are pretty chilling.
They are. The sources say the food was barely able to be stomached. It was often contaminated, but sometimes it was actively malicious.
Malicious? What do you mean?
The records are pretty clear that on at least 4 separate occasions, it was poisoned.
Poisoned? So this wasn't just rotten food that made them sick. This was intentional.
The accounts really suggest it was. The kind of violent illness it caused points to a deliberate attempt to harm them, to break them down. It's a psychological weight on top of everything else, knowing any meal could be an attempt on your life.
And you have guards constantly watching, mocking them, threatening them. Joseph's own words from that time just paint this nightmare. He wrote about not having enough blankets to stay warm.
And the smoke.
Right. When we have a fire, we are obliged to have almost a constant smoke.
You can feel his despair when he shifts from the physical pain to the psychological. He says, "My nerves tremble from long confinement." And then he says that no pen or tongue or angels could describe the malice of hell.
When he says the malice of hell, you get the sense he means more than just bad guards.
It's everything. It's the betrayal by the governments, the illegal imprisonment, and carrying the knowledge of what's happening to his people outside, all while being trapped inside 4 feet of stone.
And this is the pivot point of the whole story. You have this absolute darkness, this despair, and then somehow this is where the light comes from.
Exactly. Near the end of their time there, in March of 1839, Joseph writes this long letter, and parts of that letter, after being edited, become those sections in the Doctrine and Covenants.
So the revelation is literally born in that physical hell.
Forged in it.
The letter starts with this incredibly raw, desperate plea to God. It's a question anyone who has ever suffered has asked. From Doctrine and Covenants 121, he cries out, "O God, where art thou, and where is the pavilion that covereth thy hiding place?
How long shall thy hand be stayed?" It's the ultimate human cry from the darkest possible place. Why is this happening? Where are you?
And the answer comes. It shifts the entire meaning of the suffering.
Right. It starts with immediate comfort. "My son, peace be unto thy soul. Thine adversity and thine afflictions shall be but a small moment.
And then, if thou endure it well, God shall exalt thee on high."
And that's the immediate comfort, the salve. But the deeper teaching, the part that's so profound, comes from what he learns because of his powerlessness.
You're talking about how to exercise power correctly.
Yes, the part that becomes verse 41. He's trapped, subjected to the absolute worst kind of force and compulsion, and he receives this revelation that heavenly power can only be handled on principles of righteousness.
And what are those principles?
Long-suffering by gentleness and meekness, and by love unfeigned, by kindness and pure knowledge.
It's just a staggering contradiction. The men who put him there used force, malice, poison, and the revelation that comes out of it is all about patience, gentleness, persuasion.
The ultimate lesson on power came when he had none.
Elder Holland connected this so powerfully. He said God wasn't just teaching Joseph in that jail.
No, he was teaching all of us for generations yet to come.
It really makes you think about the cost of that scripture. Elder Holland said it so well. What a scriptural gift, and what a high price was paid for it.
6 months of that horror paid for this enduring doctrine.
And while all this is happening inside, things are starting to change on the outside.
Slowly, yeah. Public opinion starts to turn. The extermination order was so extreme, so obviously unjust, that people started to push back against Governor Boggs and the mob.
Which brings us to how they got out. And it's maybe the strangest part of the story.
It really is. In April 1839, they're transferred, supposedly for a trial. First to one county, then they're ordered to another.
And on the way, the guards just let them go.
Yep. The sheriff and the guards basically allowed them to escape. They weren't bailed out, they weren't pardoned, they were just permitted to walk away.
So why? Why would state officials risk their jobs to let high-profile prisoners escape? Was it a bribe?
The sources suggest it was a choice based on conscience. They knew the prisoners would never get a fair trial in Missouri. They saw the whole legal process was rigged.
So rather than be a part of a legal farce,
They chose justice. They stepped aside and let them go free.
that quiet act of integrity is what allowed Joseph to rejoin his people, who had by then fled to Illinois. The story ends not with a big legal victory, but a quiet walk to freedom.
And that walk leads us to the real takeaway for us today. What does all of this, the stone walls, the poison, the pleas, what does it mean now?
That the lessons are universal.
That's it. Elder Holland made that point so clearly. He said everyone, at some point, has had or will have an occasion to feel as Joseph Smith felt, to ask why and for how long.
Liberty Jail is proof that being favored by God doesn't mean you're exempt from hardship.
Not at all. So if you're struggling, you feel trapped or unfairly treated, you're in very good company.
The best company.
The best company that has ever lived. That's what he said. The prophets, the Savior himself. They all had moments of crying out in anguish. The lesson from that 4-foot-thick cell is that God hears those cries, and that enduring well can transform that pain into something eternal.
What a journey. From a death sentence to a dark, cramped cell, through poisoning and betrayal, to a revelation on power and a promise of exaltation for all of us.
And let's close on this one thought, going back to integrity. Think about those key figures again. General Donovan and those guards who let them escape. They weren't part of the church. They had nothing to gain personally. But they saw an institutional injustice, and they risked their careers, their reputations, maybe more, just to stand up for fairness. So what does that tell you? It tells you that sometimes it's the simple civic courage, the common decency of people standing up against accepted malice, even when they aren't the victim. That's the mechanism that allows truth and goodness, and sometimes even revelation, to survive.
Thank you for joining us for this day in His story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in His story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.